Few insects in our climes vie in popular fame with the glowworm, that curious little animal. Few insects in our climes vie in popular fame with the glowworm, that curious little animal which, to celebrate the little joys of life, kindles a beacon at its tail end. Who does not know it at least by name? Who has not seen it roam amid the grass like a spark fallen from the moon at its full? The Greeks of old called it, meaning the bright-tailed, since science employs the same term. It calls the lantern-bearer Lampiris noctiluca. Lin. In this case, the common name is inferior to the scientific phrase, which, when translated, becomes both expressive and accurate. In fact, we might easily cavil at the word worm. The Lampiris is not a worm at all, not even in general appearance. He has 6 short legs, which he well knows how to use. He is a gadabout, a trotabout. In the adult state, the male is correctly garbed in wing cases, like the true beetle that he is. The female is an ill-favored thing, who knows not of the delights of flying all her life long. She retains the larval shape, which, for the rest, is similar to that of the male, who himself is imperfect so long as he has not achieved the maturity that comes with pairing time. Even in this initial stage, the word worm is out of place. We French have the expression naked as a worm, to point to the lack of any defensive covering. Now the Lampiris is clothed, that is to say, he wears an epidermis of some consistency. Moreover, he is rather richly colored. His body is dark brown all over, set off with pale pink on the thorax, especially on the lower surface. Finally, each segment is decked at the hinder edge with 2 spots of a fairly bright red. A costume like this was never worn by a worm. Let us leave this ill-chosen denomination and ask ourselves what the Lampiris feeds upon. That master of the art of gastronomy, Brillat-Savarin, Anselme Brillat-Savarin, author of La psychologie du goût. Show me what you eat and I will tell you what you are. A similar question should be addressed by way... Let us leave this ill-chosen denomination and ask ourselves what the Lampiris feeds upon. That master of the art of gastronomy, Brillat-Savarin, said, "Show me what you eat and I will tell you what you are." A similar question should be addressed by way of a preliminary to every insect whose habits we propose to study, for, from the least to the greatest, in the zoological progression, the stomach sways the world. The data supplied by food are the chief of all the documents of life. Well, in spite of his innocent appearance, the Lampiris is an eater of flesh, a hunter of game, and he follows his calling with rare villainy. His regular prey is the snail. This detail has long been known to entomologists. What is not so well known, what is not known at all yet, to judge by what I have read, is a curious method of attack, of which I have seen no other instance anywhere. Before he begins to feast, the glowworm administers an anesthetic. He chloroforms his victim, rivaling in the process the wonders of our modern surgery, which renders the patient insensible before operating on him. The usual game is a small snail hardly the size of a cherry, such as, for instance, Helix variabilis. Drap, who in the hot weather collects in clusters on the stiff stubble and on other long dry stalks by the roadside, and there remains motionless in profound meditation throughout the scorching summer days. It is in some such resting place as this that I have often been privileged to light upon the Lampyris, banqueting on the prey, which he had just paralyzed on its shaky support by his surgical artifices. But he is familiar with other preserves. He frequents the edges of the irrigating ditches, with their cool soil, their varied vegetation, a favorite haunt of the mollusk. Here he treats the game on the ground, and under these conditions it is easy for me to rear him at home and to follow the operator's performance down to the smallest detail. I will try to make the reader a witness of the strange sight. I place a little grass in a wide glass jar. In this I install a few glowworms and a provision of snails of a suitable size, neither too large nor too small. Chief helix variabilis. We must be patient and wait. Above all, we must keep an assiduous watch, for the desired events come unexpectedly and do not last long. Here we are at last. The glowworm for a moment investigates the prey, which, according to its habit, is wholly withdrawn in the shell, except the edge of the mantle, which projects slightly. Then the hunter's weapon is drawn, a very simple weapon, but one that cannot be plainly perceived without the aid of a lens. It consists of 2 mandibles bent back powerfully into a hook, very sharp and as thin as a hair. The microscope reveals the presence of a slender groove running throughout the length, and that is all. The insect repeatedly taps the snail's mantle with its instrument. It all happens with such gentleness as to suggest kisses rather than bites, as children teasing one another. We used to talk of twixies to express a slight squeeze of the fingertips, something more like a tickling than a serious pinch. Let us use that word. In conversing with animals, language loses nothing by remaining juvenile. It is the right way for the simple to understand one another. In conversing with animals, language loses nothing by remaining juvenile. It is the right way for the simple to understand one another. The Lampyris doles out his tweaks. He distributes them methodically without hurrying and takes a brief rest after each of them, as though he wished to ascertain the effect produced. Their number is not great, 6 at most, to subdue the prey and deprive it of all power of movement. That other pinches are administered later at the time of eating seems very likely, but I cannot say anything for certain because the sequel escapes me. The first few, however, there are never many, are enough to impart inertia and loss of all feeling to the mollusk, thanks to the prompt, I might almost say, lightning methods of the Lampyris, who beyond a doubt instills some poison or other by means of his grooved hooks. Here is the proof of the sudden efficacy of those twitches, so mild in appearance. I take the snail from the Lampyris, who has operated on the edge of the mantle some 4 or 5 times. I prick him with a fine needle in the forepart, which the animal, shrunk into its shell, still leaves exposed. There is no quiver of the wounded tissue, no reaction against the brutality of the needle. A corpse itself could not give fewer signs of life. Here is something even more conclusive. Chance occasionally gives me snails attacked by the Lampyris while they are creeping along, the foot slowly crawling, the tentacles swollen to their full extent. A few disordered movements betray a brief excitement on the part of the mollusk, and then everything ceases. The foot no longer slugs. The front part loses its graceful swan neck curve. The tentacles become limp and give way under their weight, dangling feebly like a broken stick. This condition persists. Is the snail really dead? Not at all, for I am free to resuscitate the seeming corpse after 2 or 3 days of that singular condition, which is no longer life and yet not death. I isolate the patient, and, although this is not really necessary to success, I give him a douche, which will represent the shower so dear to the able-bodied mollusk. In about a couple of days, my prisoner, but lately injured by the glowworm's treachery, is restored to his normal state. He revives. In a manner, he recovers movement and sensibility. He is affected by the stimulus of a needle. He shifts his place, crawls, puts out his tentacles, and as though nothing unusual had occurred. The general torpor, a sort of deep drunkenness, has vanished outright. The dead returns to life. What name shall we give to that form of existence which, for a time, abolishes the power of movement and the sense of pain? I can see but one that is approximately suitable, anesthesia. The exploits of a host of wasps, whose flesh-eating grubs are provided with meat that is motionless, though not dead, have taught us the skillful art of the paralyzing insect, which numbs the locomotory nerve centers with its venom. We have now a humble little animal that first produces complete anesthesia in its patient. Human science did not in reality invent this art, which is one of the wonders of our latter-day surgery. Much earlier, far back in the centuries, the Lampiris and apparently others knew it as well. The animal's knowledge had a long start of ours. The method alone has changed. Our operators proceed by making us inhale the fumes of ether or chloroform. The insect proceeds by injecting a special virus that comes from the mandibular fangs. In infinitesimal doses, might we not one day be able to benefit by this hint? What glorious discoveries the future would have in store for us if we understood the beastie's secret better. What does the Lampiris want with anesthetical talent against a harmless and moreover eminently peaceful adversary who would never begin the quarrel of his own accord? I think I see. We find in Algeria a beetle known as Drillus Maroccanus, who, though non-luminous, approaches our glowworm in his organization and especially in his habits. He too feeds on land mollusks. His prey is a cyclostome with a graceful spiral shell, tight closed with a stony lid which is attached to the animal by a powerful muscle. The lid is a movable door which is quickly shut by the inmate's mere withdrawal into his house, and as easily opened when the hermit goes forth. With this system of closing, the abode becomes inviolable, and the drillus knows it. Fixed to the surface of the shell by an adhesive apparatus whereof the Lampiris will presently show us the equivalent, he remains on the lookout, waiting, if necessary, for whole days at a time. At last, the need of air and food obliged the besieged non-combatant to show himself. At least, the door is set slightly ajar. That is enough. The drillus is on the spot and strikes his blow. The door can no longer be closed, and the assailant is henceforth master of the fortress. Our first impression is that the muscle moving the lid has been cut with a quick-acting pair of shears. This idea must be dismissed. The drillus is not well enough equipped with jaws to gnaw through a fleshy mass so promptly. The operation has to succeed at once, at the first touch. If not, the animal attacked would retreat, still in full vigor, and the siege must be recommenced, as arduous as ever, exposing the insect to fasts indefinitely prolonged. Although I have never come across the drillus, who is a stranger to my district, I conjecture a method of attack very similar to that of the glowworm. Like our snail eater, the Algerian insect does not cut its victim into small pieces. It renders it inert, chloroforms it by means of a few tweaks, which are easily distributed if the lid but half opens for a second. That will do. The besieger thereupon enters and, in perfect quiet, consumes a prey incapable of the least muscular effort. That is how I see things, by the unaided light of logic. Let us now return to the glowworm. When the snail is on the ground, creeping, or even shrunk into his shell, the attack never presents any difficulty. The shell possesses no lid and leaves the hermit's forepart to a great extent exposed. Here, on the edges of the mantle, contracted by the fear of danger, The mollusk is vulnerable and incapable of defense, but it also frequently happens that the snail occupies a raised position, clinging to the tip of a grass stalk or perhaps to the smooth surface of a stone. This support serves him as a temporary lid. It wards off the aggression of any churl who might try to molest the inhabitant of the cabin, always on the express condition that no slit show itself anywhere on the protecting circumference. If, on the other hand, in the frequent case when the shell does not fit its support quite closely, some point, however tiny, be left uncovered, this is enough for the subtle tools of the lampiris, who just nibbles at the mollusk and at once plunges him into that profound immobility which favors the tranquil proceedings of the consumer. These proceedings are marked by extreme prudence. The assailant has to handle his victim gingerly, without provoking contractions which would make the snail let go his support and at the very least precipitate him from the tall stalk whereon he is blissfully slumbering. Now any game falling to the ground would seem to be so much sheer loss, for the glowworm has no great zeal for hunting expeditions. He profits by the discoveries which good luck sends him, without undertaking assiduous searches. It is essential, therefore, that the equilibrium of a prize perched on the top of a stalk and only just held in position by a touch of glue should be disturbed as little as possible during the onslaught. It is necessary that the assailant should go to work with infinite circumspection and without producing pain, lest any muscular reaction should provoke a fall and endanger the prize. As we see, sudden and profound anesthesia is an excellent means of enabling the lampiris to attain his object, which is to consume his prey in perfect quiet.